The French 30s fighter. The 30s terror. The D.510. Hey guys, it's model making time. Wait, there's a French flag here. Okay, I mean, I've still not learned completely French like I did last time, even if I have got a beret and a few flags around. Well, anyway, today we're looking at the D.510, or the D.510. This is, as you probably guessed, the predecessor to the D.520 that we actually did in a previous French February. As usual, we'll be having a look at the history of the aircraft itself, a history of the kit, or the kitstry as I call it, and we'll have a look at the full construction and finishing of this model kit. This is a plane I've actually flown in War Thunder loads. It's a really good low tier fighter. I actually flew it the other day with a couple of friends and like dominated in it. It's such a good aircraft and I've always wanted to make the model kit of this, particularly the camouflage version, because I just think it looks so into war, it's unreal. If you're new to the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button to be kept up to date with the latest and greatest videos that I make, and if you want to support the channel further, you can become a channel member where you can, well, help fund these weird and wonderful projects that I do. Although this is probably one of the most sensible ones that I've done. As I said earlier, this is an aircraft that I have flown in War Thunder, and if you want to see me fly in War Thunder, I do a thing called War Thunder Wednesdays where I fly in War Thunder VR and I try and just do as well as I can. I am waiting to get some like extra like glasses attachments so that I can see properly when I'm doing it, but I really enjoy it. It's really good fun and I'll hopefully be doing other flight sim stuff in there too, so watch this space, but head over to that on Wednesdays and ask me to fly this plane if you see me flying. But without further ado, let's get into the history of the D.510 itself. D.510 is a part of the D.500 family, which would later go on to produce the D.520, one of the most successful French fighter aircraft of the World War II period. This plane came from a requirement for the C1 or Chasse 1 requirement. If you have watched my D.520 video previously, you'll know that that came from things like the C2 requirement, the Chasse 2, which also produced aircraft like the Block 150 series and also the MS-406 or MS-405 initially. The Chasse 1 requirement was to have a modern airframe that could fit government furnished equipment. At least that's what the source I saw said. These aircraft were meant to be modern fighters, helping France lead the way in military aviation. I guess like a lot of air forces of the world, modernization was a key part of the development of the country following the end of World War I, and it would lead to such creations as the D.510. It also led to some aircraft that I won't be covering, but I do have a plan to cover in the future, and that's aircraft such as the Blériot Spad 510, which is France's last combat-worthy biplane. It's just like an amazing aircraft, it looks beautiful. Think CL-42 Falco, but instead of Italian, it's French. It definitely looks the part. It wasn't as successful as the CL-42, but yeah, it's really cool and that's something we'll see in the future, but that came from the Chasse 1 requirement. Now the first aircraft in this D.500 series was, well, the D.500, and the prototype of this aircraft first flew on the 18th of June 1932, followed by the first proper production variant on the 29th of November 1934, so there was quite a long gap between sort of the initial development and prototype phase all the way up to the actual production flying. The aircraft was intended to replace historic biplane aircraft such as the Nieuport de Lange NID-62. Don't know if I said that correctly, but hopefully I did. Now that aircraft had entered service in 1931, but was a very obviously 1920s design, with this one actually being designed in 1928. Now aircraft were obviously being replaced at, well, a record pace. Aircraft would only last a couple of years in service, well, up until World War II, where aircraft I guess, saw more of a development cycle rather than a replacement cycle. The D500 had 2 nose-mounted machine guns, whereas another development, the D501, had a 20mm nose cannon in the propeller hub. The D510 was a development of the D500 series with a new engine, the Hispano-Suiza 12YCRS engine, an engine that you might recognise from many of these videos as it powered things such as the MS-406 and, conveniently, aircraft like the D520. So as you may imagine, this became a perfect platform for development into the mighty D520 later on. This aircraft saw service all around the world, with countries that it saw service including China, Japan, Lithuania, Spain and Venezuela. There were some other countries as well that had evaluation aircraft. The aircraft was of all-metal construction with an open cockpit and with fixed undercarriage. Honestly, it gives Supermarine predecessor vibes, the Supermarine Type 224, which I guess is fitting considering this would become the D520, which for a lot of people is like the French Spitfire. Well, I guess since we've spoke about production, we should look at its production in scale model form. So let's go and have a look at the kit history of the D510 from Hella. This aircraft was first released by Hella in 1978, and first of all, let's just talk about how gorgeous the box art is for it. This was followed in 1979 by another boxing of it. Not long after this, we got my boxing of the kit, which was in 1996. This is probably my favourite boxing of the type. I think it just looks iconic. It gives everything that I want from this kit. Seemingly not long after, Smear released their version of this with super decals, but having some of their other limited edition kits, I'm not convinced it's going to have loads more in it than it would have done in the previous version. So, you know, it's unclear what's extra in that Smear version, but they tend to be pretty good. Now, because these kits are all quite old, you're going to see the same issues in a lot of them, and that's sort of old styles of manufacturing decals and just generally quite old decals at this point too, so they may not work as well as you want them to. Now that we've had a look at the aircraft's history and the kit history, I guess we need to go and have a look inside that box, so let's go have a look. I had wanted this kit for so long and I just love it. I think it's so great. The box is relatively simple, and being a 90s box, this is not the open top box that we know and love from Hella today, and has their older style logo on it. Coming in 3 sprues plus a really tiny glass or cockpit sprue, this is a really simple kit. The detail is relatively okay given the kit's age, and all the parts are very easily noted as to what part number they are. Obviously this doesn't hold a candle to absolutely modern day kits, but you kind of get what you pay for, I guess, with these sorts of kits at this age. But overall, the first impressions of the kit were it looks pretty good and really easy to build. It's a standard sort of a monoplane affair, just with the extra wing sections, and the glass bit here is tiny, but it again looks quite easy to just pop in place, quite clear, quite nice. The decals were stuck slightly to the covering sheet, but they look to be in relatively good condition, though there are a few bits that are slightly out of register. Well, now that we've had a look inside the box, I guess we need to have a look at the building of this kit and the finishing of this kit. I used just what's inside the box for this, except for the paints. The paints I used were Life Colours Army de l'Air set. I've been using this kit since I started doing French February. In fact, I've had to just buy another version of it because I've ran out of nearly 2 of the colours now, and it just made sense to sort of get backups of all of them because this isn't going to be the last I do. The camouflage scheme is a standard tricolour French scheme, so just be aware of that. It's a sort of a grey, green, brown camo scheme. There's a couple of different variants of the scheme, and it doesn't seem there was any fixed pattern as such. The colours also do seem to vary slightly, and I've also seen some variants that have more of a natural bleed between the colours, and some, well, I guess feathering is the word we should use. Then there were some that seem to also have a really defined line around each sort of end of the colour. So not entirely sure how this is meant to look. I follow the box itself, which seems to have quite a clean, non-feathered look. And yeah, I use the decals that are in the box, but bear in mind, this is quite old and that will come in later. Construction of the kit is relatively straightforward. Initially, I put together the cockpit section, which is basically just a chair and a control column, and I popped them in place just using my god hands to hold them in place. Now after that, I decided to put the wheels together. I don't know if I put everything together really in the right order. I think there's definitely an easy way to do this, and probably building the entire wing section and then fuselage section before putting the wings on, the undercarriage on is probably easier, but I decided to just go for the undercarriage, put that onto the wing section, and then attach the fuselage afterwards. A really weird way to build the kit, to be perfectly honest. From what I can gather, you can probably just put the wheels together and have them freely spin, but I'm not too worried about that, so I'm not being careful with my glue. It was then time to build the engine air intake. This sits underneath the aircraft and sort of holds the landing craft assembly together as well. So this is quite an important part. You kind of just have to hold bits together and then you're popping covers over it to build this shape and structure, this quite an important part. It's kind of an odd construction, but it wasn't very difficult. This won't challenge anyone. It's just a bit more delicate, I guess, than most air intakes are, especially because most just sort of are a couple of pieces that you pop onto the bottom of the wing. This is right in the center, underneath the sort of engine section itself, quite far forward of the actual cockpit. So we do get to the subject of propellers, and well, I've become quite obsessed with doing magnetic propellers recently, and so this was no different. For this though, I stuck on the cone of the propeller itself, and then I shaved away any excess on the back of the propeller to get as much of a flat and I guess almost recessed surface so that I could put the magnet in and get it as flush as possible. But the magnet kind of just sort of sits quite openly on this, but it's fine because it still matches the profile of how it should look. The upper part of the magnet is going to go inside of the engine cowling and then filled up with my putty, so it's gonna look kind of weird at first, but once it's all painted, I promise you're not really going to notice. And making sure you have a flat surface is good, so sanding it down, and then I just use some Loctite super glue. This is the gel version, or if it's not the gel version, I'm now using the gel version because it's much easier to use, gives you a lot more of a time to move it around if you need to. Now you can see that I'm filling the engine section with the putty, and then I'm just checking I've got the magnets the right way around, because obviously once it's sealed, and this is the easiest time to move everything if it's needed. As with almost every set of wings at 1/72 scale, this is a case of popping on the top sections of the wings onto the one long bottom piece. Once that was done, it was time to get the air intake into the right position on the bottom of the wing and sort of dry fit first, just to make sure, and then glue it into place. There are some tiny little guns that you pop onto the bottom. You can just about see them, they are tiny compared to my nails, but they glue onto the bottoms of the wings too. I decided to clamp everything just to make sure it got a really tight finish as it dried together. What you can't quite see me doing is sticking on the wheels, and I think because I had to bring this a bit close to my face, I didn't really get the recording great on this. But basically you have the two wheel sections that are on sort of vertical rods, and then you have one section that goes towards the air intake that's sort of a giant V shape, an inverted V. The bottom of the V goes to where the wheels are, and the open-ended section goes to the air intake, and that creates sort of the support for the struts. I guess that's probably where the suspension aspect is as well. And yeah, I glued both of those on, and they were really easy to go on. It took me a few moments to mentally think about where they need to go, but once they were on, it was... What you can see me sanding down here though is the engine air intake, just because I need to pop that onto the front once I've stuck everything together. Painting the insides black first though, to make sure that I get a really nice inside of the cockpit, and black also helps hide any gaps a lot better. So yeah, it's a nice way to cover up any uneven surfaces. I paint pretty much everything that's going to be inside black. There's not really a lot of colour to this plane. It's very much an interval aircraft where the cockpit is the bare basics. It's more of a seating area than an actual instruction area. Obviously I paint the insides of the fuselage halves as well, because they're going to be glued in paste very shortly. I check everything is fitting together nicely before I actually go ahead and glue it, because you always want to dry fit and then glue together. But it seems to all go together really nicely. The engine cover goes onto the front, which is just pretty much the front end of the fuselage, and that kind of completes the overall look of the fuselage. It's then the wings go onto the bottom and the tail section to complete. Doing all this just to make sure it all fits, and then I stick the front end of the engine compartment on and the rear control surfaces. Now the wings initially pretty much just snapped into place, didn't really even need to glue them, but obviously you do to make sure it's all secured in place. But that's pretty much it for the plane. It was really quick and easy to put together. Pretty sure I did this just on one evening whilst I was talking to some friends. Really easy build, a nice mojo build. Now my Mobius was playing up a little bit. It needed a proper clean, and thank you to Sully for helping me do that, because I need to learn how to cap my airbrushes still, because it's a massive learning curve. So I decided to use this. This is the GHAD68. This is one of Gallery's airbrushes. This is a trigger airbrush, so you don't control it with your sort of fingers. You use, well, in the same way that you would normally on top, you use it as a trigger, so you just pull it. It's single action, so you have to set the pressure correctly. You can't sort of adjust both the paint release plus the air release, but I use this to prime all of my models that I did for French February, and actually paint most of them as well. I did do some brush painting to tidy up edges, because I didn't find this as great for detail, but that's again a learning curve. I'm using Life Colors Panzer Grey primer here, and then I'll be going over Life Colors French Air Force set, the Army de l'Air set, after I've got it all primed. The prime went on really nicely, and it's about a 50-50 mix of Life Color primer to Life Colors thinner. You can use water really for these, but I just use a thinner because it's not super expensive and it does make the paints go a long way. This is Life Colors Army de l'Air set, the Army of the Air, the French Air Force, and I ended up not using this set because I got away with the paints I already had, but I thought I'd order a replacement just in case. So the first paint you're seeing going on there is grey blue France. This is sort of the main grey colour of the upper surfaces, not to be confused with grey blue for the undersurfaces. So this one is UA145. I cover the whole model with this, and then I'm going to go in and layer the camo on top of this. The French Air Force from sort of the late 30s onwards into the war period used a 3-tone camo scheme, which is very eye-catching. The next colour we're using is UA142 Khaki Français. This is a green colour. This is the second of the 3-tone camo scheme. There is another green that you get in the set, which is Vert Pomme. I don't use this one really. It's mainly sort of UA142, UA145 and UA143 that I use. I'm just going through and making some random shapes, and I'm following some pictures that I've got, including the box art itself, and also of course just googling the D.510 and seeing what comes up. I've seen this enough in War Thunder 2, so I'm quite familiar with how it looks. Plus, having done 3-tone camo on a number of aircraft before, I'm just kind of used to it. But I think this year I definitely did a lot better than I have done in previous years. Once the green was done, it was time for UA143. This is the brown for the French tricolour. I am trying to be a bit careful. I know that I'm not going to get the exact finish I want just using the airbrush because I'm overspraying. It probably means my pressure's too high and I'm not sure. It's the first time I've really used this airbrush, so I'm just trying to be a bit careful with it. But I'm using it at a 45-degree angle to try and prevent it bleeding too much. And I'm also trying to make sure I'm not covering up too much of the grey, but the grey does seem to be the least dominant colour. The brown does seem to sort of interweave around the entire aircraft and through and around the green. I try and make it so that it looks quite dominant, but not absorbing too much of any one colour. Hopefully that makes sense, but that's sort of the vibe I was going for. Once the overall camo scheme was finished, I went over with Ammo's Glossy Lucky Varnish, and then I went ahead and started doing the decals. The decals, I used Microsol and Microset throughout the whole of the build. Now, you will notice that some bits are out of register. What that means is, with this old style printing process, that some of the colours don't cover the white entirely, and that's really common from kits from sort of the 60s to the 2000s. It's not really a thing you see much more now, and that's especially true considering the blue dots in the middle for French and the red dots in the middle for the RAF, and for many other air forces as well. They have this sort of roundel scheme. They're all printed together now, but on these old kits they don't have that sort of all together. You have to put the dot in the center of the white. I tried to choose them to make sure I got the best ones on the top and sides rather than on the edge, because, well, sometimes it just doesn't look as good as it should. So hey, why not make the top and sides look the best, considering you're going to see them more? There's just some letters that go underneath the aircraft, and that's pretty much it. There's a flag that goes onto the tail section too, and I did find this sort of dissolved slightly once it's sort of all set down. I think that's just the age of the decals, however. Just so you know as well, because I didn't film it, I have covered the clear part in deluxe materials, looks like glass substance, and then I glued it onto the actual aircraft using glue and glaze. we finished the construction of the kit. I guess there's not really a lot I need to say at this point. We just need to go and have a look at the Decals D.510 popping off. Firstly, I do not love the decals. I don't think they were good. This is definitely of that era where it was more acceptable to have decals that were out of line with each other. So, or out of register is the word that we use. For example, on the larger decals that goes on the wings, I chose the two that I had to go on top of the wings because they were in register. The ones on the bottom are not. So there's like a white circle with then a slightly offset red circle on top. The same with the blue dots that go in the center of the decals. Now the blue dots are a tell in itself, much more modern printers, and as you'll see from any kit that you really buy today, including from modern Hella, will not have that issue. Historically, for RAF and French handles, and for a lot of other nations too, you would have sort of the red or blue outer circle with the white in the middle, and then you'd have to fill in with the red or blue dot, which would come separately. They were all out of register, and so it meant I had to just pick and choose to try and make it look the best it could. The decals were also not very good at sort of conforming to the shape of the model itself, so they didn't really fit super well either. That meant it just doesn't have quite the finish that I would expect from this sort of kit. It just doesn't look quite as nice, but I guess it just sort of is what it is at this point. Overall though, I think the paints came out quite well. I think it looks nice overall, and having that magnetic propeller, oh, love it. I could also try out like some funny variations of it, for example with the propeller from the block and D.510 instead, which I think looks quite cool. It's interesting to see things just with sort of those variations. I really like magnetic parts and I'm hoping to do more of them in the future. Overall, I think this kit is pretty good. In terms of whether you should buy or fly from this kit, I think you should probably buy it. It's not bad for the price. There are definitely newer variants of this kit that I've seen around, but to be honest, you can normally find this for like a £5, and for £5 or even €5, I would not snuff at this. It's a nice kit, it fits together really easily. I literally did this whilst I was sort of sat model making with some of my friends on Discord, and it was just a really quick and easy build, so I would definitely recommend it. I wouldn't pay a lot for it. I wanted this specific boxing because of the camo scheme. Most of the old ones are the silver ones only, so that is something to bear in mind. It's just the later boxings of Hella and Smur have that sort of camo scheme, which I just think looks great. There's also a lot of really cool schemes for this aircraft because it's of that 30s era, If you look at the standard 501 in War Thunder, for example, that has almost like a, I don't know, like an explosion-y camo art. It's just gorgeous. So yeah, definitely worth a buy, I think. That about wraps it up for this video. Thank you so much for being here. If you've enjoyed what you've seen here today, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And if you want to see more videos like this, why don't you leave a comment down below of what French aircraft you want to see next. If you want to support the channel more, make sure to become a channel member. It helps fund these wonderful and weird model kits, but as I said earlier, I think this is the most sensible one I've ever done, and I'm looking at ways to try and make membership even better in the future. If you want to join a friendly community of model makers, make sure to join the Discord, the link is in the description below, and there you can join a lovely community of model makers in a forum style where you can share your ongoing modelling journey and also your finished builds. That's it, thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you later, guys. Bye! Thank you so much to all of my channel members. A big shout out goes to my advanced kit level members, which includes Chris P, Model Making John, Phil, Bob and Genevieve Albridge, Callum's Modelling Centre, Darren Hall, Philip Jones, Charles Parker, Dafty Duck, David Barber, Bobby G, Taggers365, Jeff's Dioramas, Iron Duke, and my two longest, supporters at this tier of advanced kit, which is Crazy Loacher and Explosive Water. Thank you so much for everyone who helped make this channel possible. If you like what you've seen here today, make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay up to date with my latest and greatest videos. And there's a video here recommended by YouTube just for you that they think you'll enjoy. So why don't we go and have a look? Bye.